Well, joining me now is I'd like to say my good friend, even though I never see Scott Pioli. He's somebody that's been an advocate for me, somebody that's been an advocate throughout the NFL in terms of inclusivity, which I think a lot of people don't know. A lot of people are familiar, Scott, with your wealth of experience in the front office, can find you on NFL Network. But, you have a lot of different interests and are passionate about a lot of different things, and including being an advocate for women, which for me personally, as I kind of welcome you in with that sort of strange thought out of left field, I have found really refreshing. And so welcome. Thank you for being with me and for continuing to be an advocate, honestly, for women in sports, because I think it's really important. And it's part of the reason why you and I have been in touch and stayed friends over the last couple of years.
You can stay good friends because we have stayed in touch and remain good friends.
Yeah, we really have. Look, this has been a wild free agency period. And so who better to kind of pick your brain about some of these quarterbacks and what the league will ultimately look like heading into next season. And just starting with an overarching theme of the shift that we're seeing in the NFL's economic landscape. I mean, through the lens of a GM and from your, experience in a number of different roles throughout organizations in the league, help the common sort of mind understand what we're seeing here with the after effects of the salary cap and some of these huge splashy signings, not only for quarterbacks, receivers. It's been wild.
Yeah, I can do that because I am a common mind myself. And I think the thing that's interesting to me is there's this enormous jump up in salaries that we're seeing this year. But I think part of it is also a byproduct last year, Carolyn, where we went backwards with the salary cap for the first time ever. So there was this fear factor involved, throughout the country in every industry, including the football industry. It wasn't sure what the future was going to look like. So we had this economic base that went backwards in the NFL, and contracts were kind of not sure what should we do, how much cash can we pump into it. So this year we see the season goes well, the economics go well, so the cap jumps up dramatically. The other thing that's happening right now is teams also see that the cap is not only going to be high this year, that so much income has come in, and there's this new addition of revenue that's coming in through gambling that is going to make things spike. Everyone in the league, in terms of owners, are aware that their revenues are going to continue to increase. So now we see this enormous amount of cash being put into contracts where it's always gone up somewhat, steadily, incrementally. This year, because of the going back last year and then getting back to a good spot, there's been these enormous contracts come out. And the other thing that's happened, it's not just cap space. There's been an enormous amount of cash flow because every team has to keep separate books in terms of cap accounting and cash accounting.
How is this going to affect what players are demanding financially as it relates to what is guaranteed and what's not guaranteed? I mean, I know that those are kind of buzzy topics when you look across other professional leagues and how their salaries are structured. But, will what's happening with the salary cap and the after effect of what we've seen the last couple of years ultimately affect how these superstar players are going to demand to be paid or else?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a significant shift in the empowerment and the amount of power that players have. And we've seen it in every sport. We've started to see it in football. And it started in football in some other areas, but never really with the guaranteed contracts, right? Players are having more say-so. We're seeing players now, quarterbacks, wanting and making demands that they have input into their front offices and some of their player personnel decisions. So I think we're in this period of time where, I think back in the 60s and the early 70s, there were these moments where players were empowered and they were making a difference and making changes. Then there's been this lull, but now we're back at this. When it comes to the contracts, we're absolutely seeing an increase. It's been, again, slow but steady in terms of the percentage of contracts that are guaranteed, whether it was, again, 20% to 30% to 40%. We're now seeing a pretty significant increase in the amount of guaranteed money, which is something owners have always resisted. Quite honestly, I think coaches and front office people, even though it's not their money, they've resisted it as well because there's this whole thought and mentality that once a player is guaranteed money, they may not play hard in a game that is incredibly hard and brutal physically and emotionally. So we're seeing this change, and we just saw this week one quarterback actually got their entire contract guaranteed. And it's going to be interesting to see how the other owners react to the Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam, in terms of him giving a fully guaranteed contract. It's going to be really interesting to see, again, what the reaction is and what the response is.
I guess I didn't realize that the genesis of all of that, or the impetus of all of that, and it seems, pretty straightforward now that I'm thinking about it, was ultimately to dissuade players from kind of giving up on the season, or giving up in terms of their effort. Because when you think about how high the stakes are now, and you even think about what owners paid for teams, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, call it what you want, and how it has just exploded. I mean, nobody's more familiar with it, sort of the nuance of that, but you, and just how the growth trajectory that we've seen. But, I guess I'd never thought about players wanting to make their own futures uncertain with how much money can be made. And now the influx of gambling, I mean, you would think that they would be incentivized outside of a guaranteed salary.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that get complicated. You're right. I've been in the league since the onset of the salary cap. So I got into the league the first year before the first salary cap. And I want to say that the first year, the salary cap for an entire team was, I want to say, $36.6 million or something ridiculous like that for the entire team. So the growth has been enormous. And again, that growth has happened because revenues have skyrocketed. The league has become this business where they're still only giving a percentage of the designated gross revenues to the players, and which isn't every bit of revenue. It's not all of the revenue that the owners receive. And the funny thing is, I mentioned that, Carolyn, about the reason why owners and coaches maybe didn't want that. I say that somewhat tongue in cheek because I don't know if that's the real reason, or if it's just the fact that owners haven't wanted to do it. People don't want players to have that much guaranteed money. So we've got to find out an excuse, or give an excuse or a reason why we don't want to do it. So that's the reason we give. But I think, it is a little bit of this thing where some people will remain motivated no matter how much money they're getting. It's just like, right? It's every industry, it's every sport. Some people will remain motivated by things other than money. Some people will get money, feel like they're paid, and kind of lose that edge. So it's whether that's the truth or that's a narrative that's out there. It's certainly been out there for years.
Yeah. I mean, if you paid attention to what happened in Major League Baseball and, the lockout that they just had, I mean, there's kind of this constant struggle between players and ownership and where the power leverage is. I do want to get specific about a couple of quarterbacks and really just about one team, based in the New York area where I am there. I would say that there is, and this is me speaking, just a measured amount of excitement around a new GM, a new head coach. I mean, living here and following the Giants closely, and I know, of course, your history with the team, everybody wants them to do so well. And so it's so disappointing when they don't. And the pressure is immense on Daniel Jones. For a new head coach, new GM, they haven't been as splashy as other teams in free agency, but they are, putting some pieces together and trying to navigate the salary cap and what's going on there, as you detailed. What do you think Daniel Jones will need to do in order to have what is by and large considered an acceptable kind of rebound performance this season for the Giants?
Yeah, a couple of things. So, I do still pay attention to the New York Giants. I grew up a Giant fan. I think I only rooted against the Giants the times that I played against them when I was with the team, though. And yeah, especially that one Super Bowl. But the connection is more of my heart, and having been a native New Yorker. Watching what they're doing, I totally understand, because I paid attention to these jobs as they open up. And Brian Daboll and Joe, they have a salary cap issue. They went into that job knowing that there was a salary cap issue where it was going to be difficult to acquire players. That's the bad news. The good news is it's the first year. So they have time to do a couple of things with players, maybe move on from other players to gain salary cap space for the future by not doing big contracts now, by not extending players, by not borrowing against the future, by restructuring contracts. When it comes to their quarterback, this is going to be really interesting, in my opinion, because I think Brian Daboll is really going to like Daniel Jones because he's big, he's strong, he's athletic, he can do the things that Brian is going to want his quarterback to do, to be mobile, to extend plays. Different, lesser version than Josh Allen, but he's been around quarterbacks like this who have mobility and, again, can extend plays. So to me, I think it's going to be really interesting because they've got him this year. Brian's going to work with him, and Brian's been around a lot of quarterbacks that he's seen develop. He was there when we first got Tommy in New England, and we developed Tommy. He was there with Josh Allen. He was there at Alabama with Nick Saban when they've developed a couple of quarterbacks. He has seen what the process looks like, and he knows how to do it. To me, I think one of the big keys is going to be that Brian's really going to work on significantly with him is ball security. That has been a problem for him from the time that he's gotten into the league. There was a moment where he was getting better at it. But Brian, I know, won't have a high threshold of tolerance for a lack of ball security and not respecting the ball. And I still think that we don't know what Daniel Jones is yet. And he's had so much turnover at the coordinator position, at the head coaching position. There's been, sometimes I think when you look at players, there's been players that are good prospects or average prospects, above average prospects. They end up in the right situation and the right circumstance. They're given the time, the coaching, and the culture in order to develop. Other times there's quarterbacks that come in that no matter what happens, they have all this talent, they have the tools, they've got the makeup, but the culture and the situations and the circumstances around them don't allow them to develop. And I've seen it work both ways with players. So I'm not sure if things have been in the best situation for Daniel Jones, again, to see what really what kind of quarterback he can be in the National Football League.
Because you mentioned Tom Brady quickly, I mean, I want to get your thoughts on just the last month and a half, the announcement of the retirement, the botching of that. Now he's back. I mean, we joked around.
Botching? I don't know. He doesn't think he botched. He thinks he's got it right now.
I mean, I again, just speaking for me, somebody screwed up somewhere. I don't know if it was Schefter. I don't know if it was his agent. I don't know if it was the guy who puts his shoes in his closet for him. I really don't know, but something went wrong because it didn't go the way that he drew it up. And then we joked around that there might be a spite season. Oh, by the way, he might come back so that he could do it on his own terms. I mean, none of us really know him as well as you do. And I think, none of us really know kind of what's inside his head. It would be irresponsible for me to try to put you there at this point in time. But, if you could guess, why do you think he made this decision, this wild about face?
I'm not going to guess as to why he did it. Here's what I will say. When he made the first decision, I was more surprised at his decision to retire than I was surprised at his decision to unretire. And here's what I mean. It seemed like things got rushed, right? There was this release of information. It got out there publicly, and it happened so quickly after the season ended. And, one of the great lessons that I've learned that I heard from Coach Parcells 100 years ago, he would say it, and then Bill Belichick would say it because, Belichick learned a little bit from Parcells, is at the end of the season, in the goodbye farewell speech to the team, he would not only say it privately to players, but he'd say it to the group. Whatever decision you're going to make about the end of this season that impacts your career and your family, don't make it right now. Don't make it next week. Don't make it in 2 weeks. Give yourself a month for your body to heal and your mind to heal. Because if your body doesn't heal, your mind isn't going to be able to heal. And at that moment, there's 31 teams and all the players on those 31 teams that are absolutely miserable. Players are miserable, coaches are miserable, front office are miserable because they're all feeling the sting of the season having ended. So you're not making good decisions under duress, under unhappiness. My point is, he made a decision very quickly to move on. And his body didn't feel good. His mind probably didn't feel good. And again, I don't know this. I'm speculating right now. So to me, I was kind of surprised that he made this decision so quickly and so impulsive. That's not fair, but just the fact that he made it so quickly.
Yeah.
When he came back, his body was healthy, his mind was healthy, his mind was clear. So to me, like I said, I was more surprised that he retired than him unretiring.
It felt to me, Scott, like a runaway train somehow that started by accident or, wasn't thought through, a miscalculation or something. And then, he kind of jumped onto it. And then, like you said, maybe had some time to process. But I do think also as a veteran player, as somebody that is still physically able to execute at the highest level and mentally too, for that matter, it does sound like it was something that has been weighing on him in terms of the toll that it takes on his family and his kids and the personal toll that it takes, because it is so much time to manage everything. So, I'm sure.
And his parents, he's very close with his parents and his sisters, and he's, we all get to this age too where we're thinking about the mortality of those that we love too. It's not just ourselves, where we want to spend time with those people.
Yeah. Okay. I know I only have you for a couple more minutes, so I want to quickly just touch on a couple of other quarterbacks around the league. I'm curious about your reaction or insight into Russell Wilson's decision to jump into the AFC West. I mean, he did so before we saw some of these other kind of superstar signings that had been made this division formidable heading into next season, at least in theory. What do you think the future holds for him there in Denver? Is this an example of a decision that, like you say, is not rushed, but maybe not thought through? I don't know. It's a difficult place to go.
We know what a competitor Russell Wilson is, and he's hyper competitive, and he consciously made a decision, right? Because he had the no trade clause. He consciously made a decision and told the team he was with, that's where I want to go. I want to go to Denver, and I want to be in that division. I want to compete with Patrick Mahomes, who's arguably the best quarterback in the league at this point in time. I want to go in there and compete against Derek Carr, who's one of the best. I want to go in against Justin. Yeah, he wants to go in with all these guys. So to me, I also think that Russell has been thinking about this for a while, right? We saw some of the smoke, and we knew we all assumed that there was a little bit of a fire there where that smoke was. And to me, this was a very conscious decision, which is interesting in a number of ways. But his team has gotten better, right? He went somewhere, and the Russell effect, just like there's the Brady effect, where there's this effect that top quarterbacks can have on teams where their presence will, encourage other players to come, and build a team. So I don't know. I wasn't surprised, but I was a little bit surprised because there were other places he possibly could have gone. But it's clear that that's where he wanted to be.
Without kind of having you speculate about where Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield could potentially end up, because I don't know, if anybody knows that. I mean, Baker, there have been a number of reports tying to him to Seattle, but I haven't seen, as of this taping, anything that would suggest finality to that. But we've seen really big quarterback names move around so far in this offseason, and there are still a handful of holes when you look at teams who could really use a decent, quarterback.
Yeah.
How do you assess Jimmy Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield as players in terms of what they can offer and where they need to be better? How good are they actually?
Yeah, this is a great question because we'll talk about Jimmy Garoppolo first. His situation and circumstance is going to be interesting, right? He just had this surgery. So we know that he's not 100% healthy. The 49ers aren't in a rush to trade them. So this is a really good situation for the 49ers because they don't have to do anything immediately. And then for Jimmy Garoppolo, he has time to heal. On the flip side, whatever teams may want him, that gives them time to see, okay, are we going to get someone in the draft? Are we going to ride this out in free agency? Is there someone else that we might want? Here's what I'll say in terms of an evaluation of Jimmy Garoppolo. And I want to be careful in how I say this. There's sometimes when you say a player is an above average quarterback or an average quarterback, some people take that as you're dissing the guy or you're not being nice or you think he stinks. And that's where I think a lot of this gets very misguided, because if you're an average or an average above average quarterback, you're still a world-class athlete. There's only 32 of those people in the world. And so when you're number 16 or you're number 12 or you're in there, you're still pretty darn good. So to me, what I've seen out of Jimmy Garoppolo is he has been an above average quarterback who has had moments of good, a couple of moments of very good, but he's also had a couple of moments of below average. So to me, there's this very small group of quarterbacks that are elite. They're rare. They are complete, total, absolute difference makers. Then there's another guys that are kind of on the cusp. They're there. Some eventually make it. Most don't. So to me, I see Jimmy in that space. Baker Mayfield, on the other hand, I see him as being not above average, but very average. And to me, that's not being dismissive of him or saying that he's bad. Things don't have to be great or player stinks. It's, you know, I mean, it's not that far. There's a lot of gray area in life, just like there is in football. To me, Baker Mayfield, I think one of the things, because he's always been this underdog, because he has always had to fight his way, he has this mentality that is a blessing and a curse. It cuts both ways. Part of what makes him good at his best moments is the same thing that makes it difficult for him sometimes. I think he needs to understand a little bit more of what he is without losing the edge, because once I think he realizes what he is and who he is, he could maybe be a little bit more respectful to some of the people around him. And when things don't go well, he doesn't have to bear all the burden himself, but he also doesn't have to be as rough on some of his teammates publicly and privately, and or his coaches, that he is. So to me, I'm not sure where either one of those guys will end up, but I think it's going to be a little while before we find out about Jimmy Garoppolo until he's healthy. And with Baker Mayfield, I think there is a perception in the league that is a little bit less than what Baker's perception is of himself. And to me, is he one of the best 32 in the league? I think he is, but I think he also has to have an understanding of where that is.
If you're a team that needs a quarterback, can you make a deep playoff run, assuming you have some other key pieces in place with a quote unquote average or above average quarterback?
Yeah, you know, I look at our first Super Bowl win at the Patriots, Super Bowl 36. Tom Brady that season was really average. I mean, he really was. People think of Tom in the context of this guy who has 7 Super Bowl rings. I was there in 2001, and Tommy had a average I would say somewhere above average season. And he had moments that were really good and really encouraging. But here's what we had. We had a really good defense, a very opportunistic defense that made plays. We had a 1,000-yard running back in Antoine Smith, when 1,000 yards actually mattered for as much as we ran the ball. The other thing is we had a really good special teams. We created a lot of turnovers. We were going to not only in the turnover margin, but we were opportunistic at the right times. We also had special teams that made plays and made things happen. So to me, that first Super Bowl, and there's other moments in history where teams have won with average quarterbacks or above average quarterbacks that maybe had above average or maybe even extraordinary playoff runs. So do you want to have that player that can be extremely good and is going to be a Hall of Fame player? Yeah, you do. But sometimes you get by with quarterbacks that can, that aren't necessarily of, the gold jacket cloth, so to speak.
I want to ask you one more quickly before I let you go. I know you're going to kill me because I've kept you too long.
No, not at all. This is great.
I'm certainly not likening a Jimmy Garoppolo or a Baker Mayfield to the GOAT Tom Brady, but just, for clarity's sake, is it possible for an average above average quarterback to advance out of that state? Like you saw Tom Brady kind of mature. I mean, he turned into the greatest to ever do it. Is that something that you could potentially visualize with a quarterback like Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it hard to tell? Are they past that point of kind of early evolution?
Well, Jimmy Garoppolo is much further along than where Baker, completely different stages. I think Jimmy's going into his 9th year and Baker's going into his 5th year. So I think there are different stages. There's different times. I look at a player like Vinny Testaverde, who, again, was supposed to be this thing. And then he had a tough start in Tampa Bay. Then we get him in Cleveland and his career starts to do this a little bit. In Baltimore in 1996, I was with him. He had that terrific year in the inaugural season. 2 years later, we have him at the New York Jets, and he takes us to the AFC Championship game, which we should have won, by the way. But so to me, I think where we get into trouble is where we sometimes will say emphatically, again, that it's one or the other. It must be this or it must be that. And I think, I don't want to get too philosophical, but I think that's just not the way life is. And I think, a lot of people have good moments. A lot of people have bad moments, and most of us are in between. And there are moments where if you're good enough or you're above average enough and you have the right set of circumstances and you stay healthy and the people around you stay healthy, you can get an opportunity. I don't think Joe Flacco is going to get a gold jacket. I don't think Trent Dilfer's going to get a gold jacket, but they've got those Super Bowl rings. So Doug Williams, he's a world champion, and so yet he didn't have this career that was incredible.
Yeah.
Matt Ryan, a good career.
Example of it too. I think about a quarterback like Matt Ryan, who statistically, offensively is so impressive. And this is interesting to me, him going to Indianapolis. I feel like it's something to the extent of like, how do you measure your own personal success, right? And it might be different for everyone.
Absolutely. And this whole idea of, I don't think we can, and I love Matt. I spent several years with Matt. Matt has these incredible numbers. Yet the game, comparing Matt Ryan's numbers in this era of football versus quarterbacks in another era of football, we have intentionally in this league made rules that are padding the statistics of quarterbacks, receivers, in terms of catches, in terms of yards. We've allowed the game to get this way, and that's what we've chosen to do, which I'm fine. But we can't sit here and compare Matt Ryan's statistics to Joe Montana's statistics. We can't, we can't do that. We can't do that. It's this is another silly thing, and this is not old man get off my lawn kind of stuff. But I don't know if you've ever put on those gloves that receivers wear. I don't know how you drop a ball. I don't know how you drop a ball. The ball literally sticks to the gloves, and so we've done things to enhance the game, which is, again, I'm all for. But when we say that someone from the past wasn't good enough or wasn't that good, I mean, Johnny Unitas's numbers versus Matt Ryan's numbers, it's just not right, and it's not fair.
A different league. Scott Pioli, thank you so much for the time. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate it. Fascinating insight as always. Best of luck to you this upcoming season, and also with all the work that you do to try to make the NFL a more inclusive place as well.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks so much for having me. Truly a pleasure.